Well, the war in Ukraine is still continuing, approaching its 3-year mark, in fact. And the armed forces are struggling to recruit new troops. Kyiv's under pressure from the United States to lower the mobilization age from 25 to 18. It's an unpopular prospect, pushing some young men and their families to make tough choices. DW correspondent Sonia Falnikar reports from Kyiv.
This is Maxim's favorite sport in Kyiv, but his training will soon come to an end. Maxim turns 18 in November, the age starting at which men are forbidden to leave Ukraine under martial law imposed at the beginning of Russia's all-out war. Before that happens, the teenager, like many young men his age, has decided to go abroad to study.
I want to leave because I could be drafted into the army. I'll be able to return when the conflict ends. If the war lasts for 10 years, God forbid, then it's a one-way ticket. It's still hard, but I have to accept it.
Those worries have intensified as Ukraine increasingly struggles to replenish its ranks and rotate exhausted forces off the front. After nearly 3 years of war, the army is reportedly out of willing recruits. That's prompted calls by the US, Ukraine's biggest military backer, to lower the call-up age from the current 25 to 18. Olga Kupets is an expert in demographics. She says the war has further slashed Ukraine's already shrinking population. The potential pool of young male conscripts in the country aged 18 to 25, she says, is just not sizable enough and should not be sent to fight.
Studies in Britain show that the younger the soldiers, the worse the consequences in terms of PTSD, alcohol addiction, crime, suicide. So, if you take this into account, the losses for Ukraine will be huge.
For Maxim's family, the decision to send him abroad has been an agonizing one. His father, Alexei, who is 52, also cannot leave the country due to rules under martial law. That means he doesn't know when he'll see his son again. His mother, Yulia, says the issue of whether to stay or to go while the war is on remains taboo in society.
It's not easy. It's a question of ethics. Who should be sent to war? Why some and not others? Why should 18-year-olds be protected and 25-year-olds be sent? All of us who are worried about this are thinking about it, trying to find solutions. Each family in their own way.
At the train station in Kyiv, these families are sending off young male relatives abroad, far away from the fighting. Despite efforts to protect the young generation, Ukraine may have to ask them to put their future and lives on the line if the war drags on.
Let's explore this with Yevheniia Kravchuk, who's a Ukrainian lawmaker and a member of President Zelensky's political party. Welcome back to DW. Where do you stand on this difficult issue? Should 18-year-old Ukrainians be drafted to fight in this war against Russia?
Well, absolutely not, because it's the yesterday's schoolboys that just finished school. And I would like to bring you to the topic that was not covered in your video, is that the brigades that are fighting on the front, by the way, some of the younger soldiers than 25 years come voluntarily. And, it's very painful to my heart when I see in my social media networks, information that a 19 years old was killed or 20 years old was killed. He didn't even have a chance to have a family and have kids to be in this world. But there's another thing that that we're missing here is the weapons that are lacking in the brigades that are already on the front with the people in these brigades. They're not equipped. None of basically Ukrainian brigades is fully equipped, like 100% equipped. And President Zelensky said it for numerous times. And Russia is actually waging the war in the terms of meat assaults. And now bringing to the army also the North Koreans. So you can imagine Russians are bringing North Koreans from another part of the world. And we hear this pressure or whatever, thoughts that the problem of the war is because the 18 years old kids are not on the front fighting.
Okay.
No, the problem is that we still do not have artillery, the tanks.
There is a shortage. But let me just explore part of what you've said there, and you've outlined your position very well and very eloquently, and we thank you for that. But so are you saying, as what you were just saying there about the lack of equipment, are you saying that there are Ukrainian soldiers who lack equipment, who don't have a rifle, who their brigades have run out of shells? Are you saying that if there were more men put into this, then they would have nothing to do? I'm trying to just pass what you're getting at there.
They will just have more casualties. So these young people that could be drawn to the army, they will just be dead. Because when you do not have artillery, when you do not have shells, you cannot cover those who are in the front and have to go and deoccupy part of the land, the infantry. I'm meaning. So and it's not just about artillery; it's also about the armored vehicles that actually save the lives of the personnel that is on the field.
The time's against us. If not that, right, then what about replacing or rotating out those soldiers who have been on the front line since the start of this full-scale invasion, who must be exhausted?
They are exhausted, and that's the basic idea. We cannot have that demobilization, meaning that people just cannot go home. But the rotation is actually the way to give at least some rest to those who have been fighting.
From what you have said, you would not even do that because at least if you mobilized from 18 upwards, you would be able to rotate these older soldiers out. But you would be against that.
Well, first of all, when you see on the age 25 and up, you still have the, few millions, 4 millions of eligible men to serve.
Right.
So this is basically the age where this rotation could come from. But again, we have to wage the war in a modern way, in modern standards, with unmanned drones, with bigger number of drones that do not need, the alive person on the field or running in the field with a rifle. It's not the First World War. Of course, Russia does have this possibility to give, to have this meat assault. That's what they do. But we have to fight modern way, especially having Western allies as our partners. And they do have sophisticated weapons. So we do have to fight the war in sophisticated way.
Do you think that the call-up age will be lowered? And if so, when?
No, I don't think so. And this is position not just of the lawmakers, but also of the President Zelensky that say, at first, give enough of weapons for the brigades that are already on the front, so they would not be counting the shells they are using every day. And then, it's another story to talk about the conscription age and everything. But as the demographer in your video said, this number of these very, young adults is extremely small, because every country has these demographic ways, and we didn't have too many kids that were born at the beginning of the 2000s. So if we lose this population, that would be be a complete gap because they will not be able to bring kids. And afterwards, we will have this huge demographic, this hole in demography. And we will not be able to recover and then rebuild Ukraine and then actually have inhabitants in this country.
Thank you for outlining that so clearly for us. Member of the Ukrainian Parliament, Yevheniia Kravchuk. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm joined now by John Foreman. He's a former British Defence Attaché in Moscow and in Kyiv. He's joining us now from Bury St Edmunds in the UK. Welcome to DW, John. We'll talk about these potential new conscription rules in just a moment, but could we start with you giving us an update on what's happening on the front lines in Ukraine?
Yeah, sure. I think as I spoke to you before Christmas, I didn't predict that the fighting would slow down over winter. In fact, it hasn't. Russia's maintained its steady advance all along the front. And the situation, I think, for the Ukrainians is very grim now. There's a number of places, locations, cities, which are at risk of encirclement. The front line has moved perhaps 15, 20 miles in some places. The Ukrainian defences have been, as we say, dislocated because of the Russian advance. And I think also the Russians are bringing missiles, drones, they're bringing tactical aviation to bear on Ukrainian defenders inside Ukraine. So the situation inside Ukraine's grim, as well as the situation in Kursk has not really moved forward. You know, there was talk about a renewed Ukrainian advance, but that petered out. Mm-hmm. And the Ukrainians soldiers inside Russia in the Kursk Oblast are being pummeled from the air. So you put all that together, I think that's the backdrop of the Prime Minister Keir Starmer's visit to Kyiv today, the Donald Trump becoming president on Monday, formally, and then the impetus towards some sort of peace, quote unquote, negotiations in 2025.
Mm-hmm. So it's a grim situation, you're saying, and Ukraine has this problem that it can't fill its ranks. So what do you think? I mean, would drafting 18-year-olds make a significant difference in its war effort?
Yes, but I was talking to somebody yesterday and somebody in Kyiv today that the situation with manpower in particular, but it's not just manpower, it's also in terms of economic problems and weapons, but in particular manpower is severe. It's not just shortage of people in the front, it's also shortage of skilled people because of injuries, because of desertion, because of older men taking part now because of the population sort of demographic of the soldiers is older. So obviously the pressure for the Americans, as the report said, is to open up down to 18 years old. And I didn't agree with the lady who said that 18-year-olds, 25-year-olds suffer greater PTSD, whatever. I think that struck me as an excuse not to do it. It strikes me that any democracy, if young men aren't willing to fight for their democracy, then that tells you quite a lot about the mood in the country and also the potential fate of that country. Now, what can they do? Well, they've resisted opening up to 18-year-olds, but whether they actually will do it and whether Trump will set that as a precondition for any peace negotiations, I think that's highly likely. OK. There is pushback, though. I mean, there's a lot of people who are not so keen on this idea. What other options would Ukraine have to take this pressure off its soldiers on the front line? Well, you need manpower, you need money, and you need equipment. And I think that obviously countries are, like the United States, have been flooding the Ukrainians with weapons over the last month or so as the authorizations in Congress have run out, because now from Monday, there's going to be a very different president. And that president is maybe not so willing to give more weapons, as the open-ended ticket, as they've called it, on the Republicans is going to close. They're not willing to allow Ukraine to strike targets inside Russia, perhaps, and basically dial that back or have that as a leverage or a point for negotiation with the Russians. So I think in terms of manpower situation, some of these soldiers have not had any rest and recuperation away from the front for months, if not years, and they're absolutely exhausted. I think that's all contributed to it. So if the country is not willing to send more troops to the field from what pool of manpower it's got, if it doesn't have the weapons and the money is not there, then I think the situation is going to be very difficult and the Ukrainians will have to settle. However unhappy that will be for many Ukrainians who have fought doggedly for their independence over the last 3 years. We'll have to leave it there, John, but thank you so much. That's John Foreman, a former British Defence Attaché in Moscow and in Kyiv. Thank you for your analysis. Thank you.